Joining us this Saturday afternoon. It's lovely to see how many people are interested in this, so thank you for joining. And for those that don't know me, my name is Terry Damiani, and I am the current president of the Iyengar Yoga here in Vancouver, the BKS Iyengar Yoga Association. And we are very happy to be having Teddy Hindman from Edmonton joining us today. And we're hoping to have this as a very interactive. So please write in the chat if you have questions that come up, write them in the chat. And we're going to be doing a question and answer period at the end. So the popular questions we will be asking Teddy. So even if you maybe don't have a question, but you see somebody else that had a question, put like on it so that we know what the popular questions are, so we can have a nice interactive talk today. And there's a little bit of etiquette. We will have everyone muted just so as not to disturb others. And we appreciate you keeping that on while we have it muted. And like I say, at the end, we'll be a little more interactive. So without taking up too much time here, I'd like to introduce Teddy. So for you that don't know Teddy, Teddy Hindman is a senior teacher in the Iyengar Yoga Association of Canada. And she currently sits as the chair of the Assessment Association. And I personally have had the pleasure of having Teddy at 2 of my assessments. And I really appreciated her kind eyes and her words of wisdom and encouragement in the feedback. So thank you, Teddy, for being part of our assessment. It's a pleasure to have you in the room. And Teddy started her Iyengar yoga in 1982. However, her yoga journey actually began in the late 60s in Pondicherry, India. And there she was introduced to the mystical, magical, spiritual dimensions of yoga. She enjoyed the sense of community and the expansion that she felt during this time. And after returning to Canada, in search of that community, Teddy and her husband headed to South America, where they volunteered in an orphanage in Brazil. Her yoga practice remained prominent at this time. They returned back to Canada. And then in 1979, the desire to balance the understanding of yoga and the quest for training the mind took them to a monastery in Kyoto, Japan. And there, Teddy studied Zen meditation for the next 3 years. When Teddy was in Osaka, Japan, there was a talk, and it had 3 speakers on the bill. One was Okaya, a Japanese yoga teacher. One was Swati Satchidananda, which was the guru who opened Woodstock. And the other was some guy named BKS Iyengar. So looking back, I think perhaps that might have been an omen. Coming back to Canada, the family returned, and then Teddy was instrumental in helping to form the Yoga Association in Alberta, and to date she still sits on the board of directors. And she has been teaching for the last 4 decades, that's 40 years, 4 decades in the Iyengar method and in Zen meditation. So without further ado, thank you, Teddy, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Teddy, and thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Terry and Tanya, for setting this all up. And I see just a few names, but yeah, I'd kind of like to turn off your mutes and just chat with you, Linda, and all the others that I know there. It would be so much fun to catch up. And thank you for having me. I'll just correct a little bit this. I don't want to come across as any kind of philosopher or scholar or grandiose teacher. I've been a student of yoga pretty much most of my life now, and certainly and I'm still a student. I'm still trying to put this together, but probably the most important thing I have to say is the very act of staying on the student path has been a lifesaver for me. I'm just constantly wanting to know more about myself and about what others have said in their search for some kind of meaning in this universe. So again, I'm not any scholar, but the more I learn, the more I love learning. And if you learned something from me, that would be just terrific. I'd like to start with this little story. Nasruddin, who's a Sufi master of comedy in the 13th century. Nasruddin, there are all these little cartoons about Nasruddin from the Sufi line of things. And he's a Persian Sufi, and there's usually a little message that somehow always comes back to me and clicks with me. So I'm going to start our little get together with Nasruddin. A neighbor came to the gate of Nasruddin's yard. Nasruddin went to meet him outside. Would you mind, Nasruddin? The neighbor asked. Can you lend me your donkey today? I've some goods to transport to the next town. Nasruddin didn't feel inclined to lend out the animal to that particular man, however. So, not to seem rude, he answered, I'm sorry, but I've already lent him to somebody else. All of a sudden, the donkey could be heard braying loudly behind the wall of the yard. But Nasruddin, the neighbor exclaimed, I can hear it behind that wall. Whom do you believe? Nasruddin implied indignantly. The donkey or Nasruddin? So your experience is what's important in the yoga practice. And when I say yoga, I mean Zen as well. It's not really what everyone else, it's not a belief. It's not something that you believe in. You have to practice. I mean, Guruji told this to us all the time, and so have all my other teachers. You have to practice, and you have to realize that if you can hear the donkey behind it, you've got to realize that your experience of hearing, your experience is what matters. It's not sort of what your thinking mind says. And so I think that's important because it's an underlying message to the practice of yoga. It's your own experience that you must give credit for. And so, given that it's your own experience, what is this yoga all about? Well, certainly when I started in India, nobody even knew about the word yoga, certainly not in Canada. When I wrote a letter to my parents, they had no idea what this yoga stuff was all about. And the people in India that were there, even the Beatles at that time, there was a sense that you were going to India for this spiritual kind of quest. And so the essence of yoga is, in fact, that it is a spiritual practice. And I'm not so sure in the modern day world that comes across all that well, but I think it's important for everybody who's here today to just be reinforced by that fact that yoga is a spiritual quest. And so what is spirituality? If you look even on Wikipedia, spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. In general, it includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves. And it typically involves a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience, something that touches us all. So it's a quest, it's a connection to something bigger than ourselves. So I'm going to bring in another little story, little clip here from, it's from a Hindu background. And it tells a Hindu story of a fish who went to a queen fish and asked, I've always heard about the sea, but what is the sea? Where is it? And the queen fish explained, you live, move, and have your being in the sea. The sea is within you and without you. And you are made of sea, and you will end in sea. The sea surrounds you as your own being. So that comes up in my mind a lot as well over these 30, 40 years, that the sea is within you, around you, and you are the sea. So that experience is really what yoga is all about. That within you and around you is also who you are in the wider context. Sometimes when we talk about this, in yoga, in the sutras, for example, the fish, and I'll go back to that because it's pretty simple. The fish is the small self. The fish is myself, my ego, Teddy. You know, I'm a mother, I'm a teacher sometimes, I have lots of friends, I do this, I do that, I'm in a book club. All those things are small self Teddy, and they're really important. But I'm also something, I'm connected and am part of, and as part of me is the bigger picture, the big C. And in yoga sometimes, and in the sutras, that bigger C is expressed as a larger self, capital self. So small self, me, capital self. It's sometimes described as divinity, you know, the divine within, and is sometimes considered as light, the light within. And so we know I'm sure everybody here knows that in your practice, in the very beginning of our practice, you know, we give credit to the light within. We're seeing sort of the small C, or the C within ourselves. And so that connection is really important, I think. I think it's important to start with that when you're on your fitness mat, so to speak. When the mind when the mind starts to turn inward, this experience becomes larger and greater and clearer to you as you continue to practice. In the sutras, there's two main aspects of the sutras that you see over and over again. And one is this sense of spirituality and your connection to your larger self. And the other is the statement in the sutras that in order to really experience, like the sound of the donkey, to really experience it, it involves a training of the mind. And so the training of the mind we get, and in particular, obviously since I've been involved in Iyengar yoga, not teaching it for 40 years, but it's my method. You get that training on your mat because the training of the mind is really to direct your mind to yourself. All spiritual teachings have a sense of the body, of embodiment. And we're so blessed with the method of embodiment that we're all learning. One thing I have to say here is that in the sutras, it doesn't tell you how to practice. It doesn't tell you to do Trikonasana in a certain way. It tells you the quality of your practice. It tells you that there's to be a sense of awareness, awakening, and concentration. It doesn't tell you exactly what you're supposed to do, but that quality is also something that's really important when we go to our mats, that connecting the sense of spirituality and the mind training, we move firstly, it seems, in the Iyengar system to this embodiment where you pinpoint your attention and your consciousness to various aspects of your body. Guruji said that in order to really do this, we need a power of awareness and unwavering attention. So first, you're pinpointing your mind, let's say on your feet, and then pulling up your kneecaps, and then pressing the front thighs back and rolling your shoulders back. Those are all incredibly good, for me, have been incredibly good ways of focusing, pinpointing attention with the help of my teachers, for sure. And at first, Patanjali says in the sutras that that kind of pinpointing of your consciousness, that movement of your concentration, at first he says it's adventurous. And a lot of people just come in because it's adventurous and because they know that if they do this practice, they'll physically feel better. But if you look at it in terms of the real meaning of yoga, it's you're training your mind, you're culturing your mind to start to go deeper and know itself. And for me, that's been really, has kept me doing yoga, because I've always felt, well, you know, there are lots of good fitness things, but I want something that's going to really connect more. So at first you're fluctuating your mind in the sense that you're going from one body part to another. And then at some point, and it's in the second sutra, and I'm assuming you all know the idea of the sutras from Patanjali. This is like 2000 years ago. The second sutra, yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. And so in the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind, you're moving into dharana. And I'm sorry, I meant to have Terry just quickly do a review of the 8 limbs of yoga, but Terry, I'm going to hold you off for a minute. So when you are moving from the fluctuations of your mind pinpointed on embodiment, at some point there's a sustained concentration. And you could see this with Guruji in India. And he, in fact, has written in Light on Yoga that this calm state of mind, this unwavering awareness, is the link between asana and dhyana and the doorway to meditation. I'm going to interrupt me for just a minute and ask Terry to just quickly go through the 8 limbs of yoga, because as I'm speaking, I'm referring to them, and I feel like I'd like to have that little foundation again and then pick it up. So Terry, do you mind?
No, no problem. Okay, so the 8 limbs is the yamas and the niyamas, which is the ethical behavior, the do's, the don'ts, the moral fiber. It's like the 10 commandments. Asana, which we are more familiar with, which is the postures. Pranayama, which is expansion of the life force through observation and control of the breath. Pratyahara, observing and withdrawing from the senses. Dharana, one-pointed, focused concentration. Dhyana, a steady and profound flow of contemplative observation, a state of being with prolonged concentration. Concentration on one point or region, reducing the interruptions of the mind, and the mind penetrates the core of one's being. The object in reality is pure existence. And then samadhi, which dissolves the split between the object seen and the seer who sees, a state of expanded consciousness. Self as in capital, self-realization, a oneness with no other.
Thank you. Okay. So historically, Hatha Yoga, the postures and pranayama were meant to be practiced in conjunction with a meditation practice. When I started, it was a little bit more like that in India. As yoga's being more modernized and more westernized, this sense of moving it towards a more meditative practice, I think we should be reminded of that sense of the meditative practice. And Guruji says in Light on Life, I am practicing yoga, but at a level where the quality is meditative. So I know Linda, a whole bunch of us have seen Guruji for long periods of time in one pose. And you knew he's in this state of dhyana. Dharana is taking us there. Pranayam also is incredibly important to take us there. And I say take us there, but it's sort of remove the obstacles because it's bringing us to realizing ourselves. So when you do the practice and your meditative mindful practice, it comes to a place where you're still and silent. And Guruji also says that Shavasana is that place where you're not dealing with yourself. Shavasana is like a gateway, a doorway to that calm, tranquil state of mind. And that in that calm, really qualitatively quiet silence and stillness, your mind's not fluctuating around all the time. And when you're not fluctuating, the experience of the sea comes forth. So how do we get it? It's kind of a paradox because you're not getting anywhere. You're not becoming a nice person as a saint or anything. It's not a becoming. It's already there. It's more like moving. I'll use another simple analogy, moving the clouds away from the blue sky. You're the blue sky and the clouds are getting in your way. What's keeping you from experiencing the blue sky? And it's really your thinking mind. And it's really how you're training your mind to not have your preferences, your opinions, your thoughts, all of those things that are really important for your small self. But in the big, those need to quieten down. The Zen people say it needs to be quiet and still for the muddy waters to clear. And in that clarity comes forth this sense of realization. How do you take that out of, say, well, okay, I'm going to go and do my yoga practice with the help of teachers, and I'm so grateful for all of mine. Some of you are listening now, for all of mine who kept my mind on the practice in the present moment. So I'm not thinking about other things. And I'll give you just the most important personal time for me was when my husband died. And it just sort of like nothing meant anything anymore to me then. But I'd already had the experience with my yoga teachers that when I did a practice, I wasn't thinking about, oh, poor Teddy without a husband. I was just in my practice and it was like such a beautiful break. And I realized that my mind the small mind needed to just rest a bit and not be in the thinking aspect. So, and there are many other experiences like that where I felt so grateful that I could be in a yoga practice that would keep me in the present moment. So then how do you take this, this quietening of your mind into doing things during the COVID times when I know it's super difficult for a lot of people, and during these times when the political situation has been super difficult for a lot of people. And many of us will go for a walk, just get out. We can still do that here, we're not restricted. You go for a walk, and I see others going for walks as well. And sometimes I see, people's heads down, and I think, they've been online all morning and they're walking, and I kind of feel like their heads are back there online and their bodies are going for a walk. And then I think, well, maybe mine's doing that too. And I'll refer here to a well-known American naturalist. Probably you've heard Henry David Thoreau in the 1800s. And he says, "What business have I in the woods if I am thinking of something out of the woods?" And so it's the same thing when you're doing yoga. Sometimes I know this from my own experience. You're just coming into Shavasana and you're there for a few minutes and you're in beautiful, quiet, no thinking mode. And then you think, then it's like, oh, did I remember to buy the broccoli for dinner tonight? You know, and you go off, it's very natural. But can you watch that in a non-judgmental way until you can actually get little glimpses where you are actually being in the sea, being in nature, without clouding it over with all of your thoughts and concerns. And then it's so refreshing. You know, there's sort of a joy that comes in. So, or can you do your pranayama? And pranayama is really personally extremely hard. You know, if you can get a number of breaths all in a row without letting your thinking mind take you away, that's, again, it's getting your mind to settle. And so I'll turn it over to you, but I think that to me, the starting on your mat where most people come in and knowing that physically it has really been helpful. I mean, I have to change my practice a lot because I am unfortunately getting older, but it hasn't changed my interest, my enthusiasm about sort of training the mind or trying to keep it on a yoga spiritual path. And because of that, I just feel it's important to share and reinforce those of you who are already on the path. So stillness, I'll just finish with this. Stillness and silence and quietness, even for a short amount of time, are like Shavasana. They're kind of a prerequisite to knowing the sea. They're kind of a prerequisite to the sacredness and around you, the blessings around you. And you can experience that, which I'm sure you all do at moments. You can experience that like you hear the donkey, and you can take that more and more into your everyday life so that the ups and downs kind of take their place in this huge cosmos, and that you can deal a little more easily with them. So I'm going to stop there. I'll just go back to the 8 limbs. I'm referring to bringing in a little more of the understanding of dharana and dhyana, and as I see it through Guruji, and as I see people coming into yoga, know that you're starting to do this, and that is definitely more than just thinking that you will maybe be a little more fit by the practice. So can I turn it over to some questions? Terry?
Mute here. There, I'm unmuted. Okay. I do have a question for you, Teddy. And as you say, you know, at certain times I have experienced that's where I am one, and I feel blissful and life is wonderful. But sometimes I feel like it's one leg is in the form world and one leg is in the formless world. And it's almost a pull, you know, like you're so easily pulled. People are my challenge. People are a huge challenge for me. And that I can be all wonderful in nature and feel, you know, very, very grounded. And then a person will come along and I get pulled, like my ego gets pulled to them. And so I'm wondering how to control myself from not being taken over and engaging with other egos. And it becomes ego and ego as opposed to essence and essence. Make sense?
Yeah, and I think you speak for all of us.
Oh yeah, not alone. Okay?
I kind of see it like training a puppy dog. And a lot of you have new dogs, I gather. it goes off and you just have it on this little train, this little leash, and it goes off and you just gently pull it back, and then it goes off and you pull it back, and then it goes for a while and it's okay, and then it goes off. You look at your breath, you're concentrating on pranayama, you're in a good asana, you get into Shirsasana and you're in it, and then you start to daydream about something and you realize you almost fall over. You've gone off. Okay. So on that line, the very fact that you know that you've kind of gone, uh-oh, I went off. And I think that going off is more like I'm back into my ego.
Mm-hmm.
And you need your ego. You're not supposed to get rid of the ego. You do need it, but I think the important thing is the objectivity, the awareness, and the non-judgment factor that you're seeing your ego. Here's my ego. Good example is in politics these days.
Mm-hmm.
I still, my heat rises when I get into a disagreement with a Trump supporter or something, and you just feel it. But there's a little space now that is, it is the space that I've created, like the space you get in Shavasana, and I can feel my ego coming, and sometimes it goes too fast, and I'm the fish, not the sea.
Right.
Is that really what, am I answering this? I'm the fish, not the sea, and it's there. And it's like, uh-oh, I did it again. I'm the fish, not the sea. But the fact that I knew that has made a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just bring this question because there's so many things that I wanted to say, but this one I really did want to say about ego, that you need it. And in fact, the more you practice yoga, the more you practice meditation, the less judgmental you are about yourself. You're not perfect in your own eyes, but you're just doing the best you can. So anyway, on that note, but Guruji said something that I've often repeated about egos, and he says, a practitioner who can put aside his everyday identity, the ego, can access places where no plump ego could squeeze through. And so it gets me a little bit of humor. It's like, oh my gosh, here's this plump teddy ego getting plumper all the time, having opinions, having likes and dislikes, having ideas about the way things should be. That's human nature. But are they plump? Are they too big? Is the fish getting too big and not realizing that it's in the sea? And so I think the big, huge step is you're starting to be aware of that happening. And then the other is when you go to stillness and quietness, there, even if it's just for a few seconds, you might be able to catch yourself on that. Does that make sense to you?
It does, yes.
I have to say that living in Japan for 3 years in a kind of monastic setting was, that and assessment probably were the two most difficult things in my life. But living in and sitting still was really hard. That actually was one of the reasons why I needed to get back into a more embodied world of practice. But that the sitting still puts you face to face with your own ego and the way you think about things. You see it so clearly. And our Western nature, I think it's changing, but our Western nature hasn't nurtured a still quietness. Now, our yoga teaching does that, but I think if we remind ourselves how important that is, those few minutes at the beginning of a class, and then you feel a lot of people, you can always tell, at least I can tell at the end of a class in Shavasana, that was where I would really watch to see if that person had really let go. And the ones who are fidgeting or starting to move, I know they're thinking about the kids at home, or their husbands are waiting for them or something. They've already gone. And I know that because I did it too. And if if you can take a little bit of stillness time and maybe start with pranayama, and then I have to use a timer, or I had to use a timer and say, okay, just for 10, 15 minutes, just sit there and be with yourself. And then all the thoughts come, and then just let the thoughts go back to breathing in, breathing out. Those are such incredibly great practices. And you will hear those. And now in the world of technology, and you can go into other different lineages, and the bottom line always seems to come back to that your sense of spirituality is that connection, and that connection can come without any, with just a connection that resonates with the way you get it, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Yeah, Linda.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the first story you told about the guy with the donkey. 'Cause-
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah, so there's the man who realizes that the donkey's being lied to in a way. Somebody's telling him something. But what was the point of it? I didn't get it. I didn't get the point.
Thank you. I really like this one because it really made me think about that too.
Yeah.
The point is trust in your own experience.
For who? For the guy who's asking for the donkey, or the man who's saying no?
The guy who's asking. The guy Nasrudin is kind of what's the word? A rascal. He's always trying to. He's the real rascal in things, and so the person coming wants something from a so-called master. Mm-hmm. And the master is leading him on. I mean, in the Zen stories, you get all these weird and wonderful paradoxes of people. Mm. And actually, I have to say, with all 100% respect, I think that's what kept me with Mr. Iyengar, because he was a paradox for me. He wasn't like, as Terry mentioned, an experience I had with Satchidananda, who was just so loosey, lovey, wonderful, exuded peace and love. And at that time in Japan, Oki sensei was a very hard master. He was a military man, and I went to some of his classes and they threw balls at me, hard balls, and we had to do these crazy things to just toughen up and become embodied. And then and it was Iyengar, who was sort of, I didn't know who he was, but when Iyengar is a hard master. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I am so appreciative of that, because most of us who've been in his classes, you're there in the present. You're not daydreaming, because both Gitaji and Guruji, they're on you in a second. And so you have to bring yourself back and then in some ways, what I'm thinking about now is that you become really so much better embodied, and all of you teachers here are fantastic in the way that you do this to bring us back to our bodies. But then there's this, if the purpose is to bring a quieter, what I'm trying to think of, not passive, but a quieter state of mind. How, when you're almost there, and this is why Guruji says Shavasana is the link, because you get, if you can manage, and he says it's the most difficult, if you can manage that quiet state of mind, and then I think we need a little bit more time after that, where you sit up and you're still in that quiet state of mind, and so it permeates you. You're the sea, like, and then can you take some of that out with you? And as the question is, you can't walk around sort of not with it, but you can come back to it. So anyway, the Nasrudin thing is, there are a lot of wonderful teachers around, and there's so much stuff online that you can learn from, but it isn't your own experience yet. You know, that's sort of what I was getting at. That for a person who hasn't had all that time in India, which some of us have, and you're just looking at it and you're reading it and you're going from one teacher to another teacher to another teacher, and yet you still need to practice. You gotta trust yourself is really it. Trust what you hear and see by your practice. That makes sense? Now
I'm just kind of wondering if the guy gave him the donkey.
Okay, but you might remember the story.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I also enjoyed the story of the fish. Very good.
I kind of go, I find that the blue sky kind of analogy is really helpful. When I'm not on my mat, like it's the mat is such one of my teachers, Vanda Scaravelli, used to say that doing a hatha yoga practice was a holiday for your mind, and because you're not thinking about COVID and all your problems, and you're just doing your practice. And that's why I think the Iyengar method is so helpful, that you're that kind of holiday. But then I often now, because I have an outside life, I do go outdoors, and these days mostly by myself. And so then I can feel thinking mind happening, and blue sky. And blue sky, Guruji says, and so do the other great teachers, that the sense of the sea, the sense of self-realization is always there in you. It's not like you're going to become it. It's always there, but sometimes your thinking ego mind is the reason why you don't know that. And so, you know, I'll be jogging along and thinking mind is in there. And then I'll think, well, what's keeping me from blue sky? What's keeping me from being in where I am, that present moment? And how many clouds are in the way? Is this a dark cloud day? And, you know, lots of stuff going on in my mind. Can I use a little bit of the training to let that go? And so what I would like to get across more is to take these practices that we've been so blessed to have and continue to have, to make your life more meaningful. Anybody say?
Hetty, I have a question. It's Susan. As well as the yoga practice, you know, recently somebody said, well, yoga is life. And I do my yoga practice, but I also spend a couple hours a day playing piano. And often that is the deeper practice for me. I'm just curious what you think about how yoga or how music creates a similar or sometimes more powerful stillness, even though the mind is actively playing the music.
Right. Susan, actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to say something about that, but then I thought I might get into territories where, you know, I'm like, I didn't hear the donkey because I'm not a musician, so I'm not practicing, but I get it. And I think that there's a lot of enlightenment that is experienced by musicians that they get, and also that the present moment part of the musical world, the fact that that when you're first of all, when you're starting to learn to play, you know, you do have to do the practice of the notes and the scales and everything. That's sort of like the first days on your sticky mat. You're into the foundation before you really get to the real deeper and deeper. There's that part of it. There is a system there, and it is in the present moment, because you can't, you know, you have to be with it or you don't play well. But there's also something about the music that I think is really special, and that is, if you take any particular song of music that you love, you're not putting that music on and trying to wait for it to be over. You're not waiting for the end of that song. And sometimes when I hear people say, oh, I can hardly wait till COVID's over. You know, I just have to get through this. And I feel like saying, when you put on a song, even if it's one that brings a grieving, intense feeling for you, are you waiting for it to be over? Oh, no, I'm not waiting for my music to be over. You're not waiting. And then so you're not waiting. I'm not waiting for my life to be over. And I'm not waiting for COVID to be over. I mean, sometimes I do, like the rest of us, because I'd like to see my grandchildren. But that whole attitude of living your life like you're waiting for it to be over, I think music is a good example, because you're not involved in your music for it to be over. You're really in it. And I think that it can bring you to that wonderful state of quietness. And I suspect that the creativity that comes when the music's kind of stopped, and it's like the gap between your breaths, and creativity comes. And so if a musician sees their music practice in the sense of yoga philosophy, it's beautiful to me.
Mm.
Does that say anything to you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my personal.
Yeah, no, that's lovely.
Whoops, I lost you. Oh, you're on mute there.
No, that was very, very meaningful. I just had a little smile because I had a 2-hour piano lesson yesterday. And by the end of the 2 hours, he was at bar 349. I'm going, oh, please, well, this will be over soon. So it was a beautiful analogy that you gave.
I do want
because that's different than the experience of the music, right?
I do want to say though, Susan, that the benefit of having a larger yoga foundation and philosophy, I'll say two things here. One is the asana really does matter for your health. So your whole experience of your joy in life, from the little that I know, that I would think is better when your health is better. And asana brings the health aspect into it that maybe you wouldn't get, you need that balance. And the beauty about the yoga asana is that it brings your mind into that embodiment as well as your music. I mean, we're pretty amazing human beings. You can double whammy that there with your training in your asana to keep your posture, your heart open, and play your music at the same time. Mm-hmm. This is where I see it, that sometimes you have to go more on the asana part of it, and sometimes more on the the music part of it. And that's how I see it.
Mm. Thanks.
Again, I'll just go. That's why the 8 limbs of yoga are so wonderful, because they take the whole thing into it. Before I forget, also, I just want to comment on, and again, this is just my personal thoughts, and here I am sharing my personal thoughts with you. The modernization of yoga, which is, when I'm starting to realize my years here, but when I came back from India and first started doing a little bit of yoga here, there was one teacher that I knew and now, you know, there, every time I see a bike ride by, even in the snow, there's a sticky bat rolled up behind it. So there, everybody's practicing yoga. It's a big thing. And I'm a little concerned that it's the modernized yoga is missing perhaps the yamas and niyamas. And I say that because I read a few things recently about how yoga training and practice is well used in the military now. Both the yoga training, fitness and asana, and also yoga mindfulness, mind training is used in the military so that they will be better when they go off to Afghanistan or wherever it is they're going. And there's a reference there that all of this is based on moral, ethical behavior. So I think, you know, I just wanted to make sure that you remember that in the 8 limbs of yoga, the morality behind that, and in your own sense. I used to say to my class sometimes that, you know, if you're feeling you're in a calm state and a tranquil state, then when you go home, don't beat up on your husband and your kids. You know, I mean, you didn't do yoga if that doesn't kind of carry on with you. So I had to get that in about the modernization. Thank you for asking questions, because it's really makes this fun for me, and I love to see the faces when you ask a question. So please do.
I believe that Jane had a question. She'd had her hand up. Jane, did you wish to ask something to Teddy?
Where's?
I think it's okay now. Sorry.
I'll ask anyway.
No, it's okay. It was really just a comment. So.
Well, Jane, are you our Sanskrit gal? Are you the gal who studies Sanskrit?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're the one who's supposed to be speaking to us today.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you are a scholar of Sanskrit, and I'd appreciate what you have to say, what your thoughts are about, particularly the second sutra. You know, the Chittavritti Nirodha. How do you see that in your practice?
Well, just from the comments, the questions there, one about donkey work. I was thinking about donkey work, Mr. Iyengar's use of the word donkey work, and so about the ocean, the sea, that there are, when you go out and the ego rises up, Bhutana, or you know, when the mind rises up in Shavasana or whatever, that the vritti, but the ways are very useful. And Mr. Iyengar, he really makes use of that, particularly in asana, to find symmetry and pranayama, because you become very aware and you go right, you're off balance, trikonasana, right? Actually, your body is working to find a less effortful way of going so far off the center line. And then you come to symmetries in some way at some point and go to the left. And so the deep samskaras in your body are uprooted in that time of turbulence. And so you actually work on them because of that turbulence. So when you go off your mat, when you meet someone and your reaction is to interact ego to ego, I think it helps you see your samskaras, just as in the practice. Like Donald Trump has really made people less complacent about systemic racism. So that is the vritti can have positive side effect, but to just return to the place where you're not challenged and it's peaceful, that is vritti itself, is to just retreat to the cave. It's good to have the interruption and the calm state, but if you're just using it as avoidance or thinking that, and without doing the donkey work, then I don't think it can transform into regular life, which is, like you said, is just a huge challenge for, well, for me and for like probably most people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because certainly in the world of Zen, which is face certain styles of Zen, the Rinzai style of Zen, you sit down and you're not to move, and you're still, and you're just there like for 2 hours more all day sometimes, and then it's from a Western point of view, it's like, what a waste of time to just sit there and do nothing. And you're retreating, as you said, you're just kind of escaping the world by doing this. You know, it's not seen by the Western world as such a positive thing. And people have come up to me many times over the years and have said, oh, if you just sit in your nice calm state of mind, what good is that? You know, what's the point? And you're just escaping, you're retreating, you're being passive because you can't meet the real world. And this constantly comes up. You don't want to see those fluctuations. You don't want to put your ego online with other people. And I think there's some validity in that, because a lot of longtime practitioners who just go into their ashrams and retreat have a very difficult time when they come to the real world again. My understanding is that I'll use the Dalai Lama as an example for this, because I see, and I use him because everybody knows who that is. And he has I've heard about 4 to 6 hours of practice a day, in retreat, in stillness, and most of it. And he's very engaged with the world. And he says he gets angry and he cries and he's very involved in the world. And so, and he gets confrontation a lot. I mean, he's dealing with the Trump types in the world a lot, and he keeps up with it. And so it's not that one should just think that because you're into the experience of the calm state mind, that you aren't interacting ego with ego. I think it's more, at least in this stage of my understanding, it's more that you see what you're doing. And that every time you get that something that pulls you out of whack, you realize why that pulled you out of whack, and can you get back to your center again? Does that make sense to you, Jane? Is that?
Yeah, and I think asana teaches that nicely. And
I think so.
And the instrument also, I notice, is that in music, like the body is the first instrument for music, and the voice, that the rhythm, everything about music is the body made bigger, or it's go through another medium. And there's a word for that, but anyway.
Expansion. There's a real expansion.
But when you, it's a transducer. You use an actual physical instrument to transduce the voice primarily, and the right left hands. The right is usually melody, sequential, conscious mind. What you watch, when you speak, is in sequential order. But the left side, like a pitcher who's right-handed, let's say, the left hand is doing supportive movements. And so the music is a miniature body, and just like the voice is singing, it's just not extremely, it's not shown as loudly, or so you are always singing and you're always dancing, and the facial animation is always dancing, weighing decisions. And so I think that the music is always there, and there is an element of attention is always introduced in music that gets resolved. And so again, the challenge part is important also if it's used as mindfully.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that the music is very much there. Even people don't, through Mr. Angers use the body as an instrument beautifully. All the layers of the body keep your face soft. You know, every part of the mind is touched through the body.
Mhm. Well, and you're saying, as we said, that a spiritual practice and the yoga spiritual practice of turning inward. You know, I think sports too, and I don't want to get way off the track here, but sports and music and art are also ways of self-realization. But even if you look at, there's something in that Iyengar has said, but also in some of my other teachers, that there can be moments where you are not thinking anymore, and you're the oneness aspect. You know, yoga is now, yoga is one. And that those fleeting moments of oneness in sport and perhaps in music, they're still a little bit outside of yourself. I find this difficult quite to explain. Whereas the yoga practice, you can come back to that experience without having to do your sport anymore. You know, you can come back to the feeling you had in your most expanded sense of music or whatever you did. That realization in yoga, you learn to bring that back. I'm not in, and without your piano or without your basketball or something. That's kind of where I see a little bit of the difference. And but that doesn't mean that the paths are different. They're just different paths. As again, in the sutras, they don't tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. They just give you a framework about what areas can help you expand your consciousness. And you just know it's right. Thank you. These questions or these things are great for me to chat with you. I want to hear what you have to say. Louis, I want to hear from you.
We actually, Alice had a question.
Okay.
Alice, did you want to ask Teddy, please?
Sure. Teddy, you don't know me. I don't know you. Although I think I might have been a student at one of the assessments, but I'm a student. I've been a student for about 35 years of yoga, and but I'm not a study student. So forgive me if there's something that I should have known by doing what my yoga teacher has told me to read Mr. Iyengar's books, Light on Yoga. You know, I've started them, but I haven't studied them. So my question has to do with, I guess, your thoughts or others in this group of that, what spirituality and religion. So I have done work, I'm a consultant, and I've worked in the housing world with religious groups, and Baptist groups, Jewish groups, and there's that sense that some external force is telling you what is good, what is right, and what is wrong. I don't subscribe to those things, but I feel that I have a knowledge of that. And I believe that it has to do with being a yoga practitioner. And so I guess I feel that like what you're saying of being conscious of being the sea, and that knowledge of, you know, you don't need somebody from outside telling your small letter self what's good and what's not good. So that's it. It's a question that I feel that I think about a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, oh, this is great, because it's kind of like that Nasrudin thing. And that's what I was thinking of when I interpreted the Nasrudin donkey story too, is that I come from a Western, well-trained Catholic background. I went to a convent. I taught in a Catholic school. So, so I get that part of it, and I appreciate that part of it. But I've had more than someone, people in my class who actually stopped coming to yoga when I started doing the invocation because they said it was against their religion. And so I realized then that I had to be a little more careful in my own understanding. And that's sort of why I did this Nasrudin thing, because when the yoga philosophy, as I understand it, is not a belief system. You can believe in whatever you want. So it is not a belief system. People don't quite understand that, but you have to know that yourself. So when you're not believing in anything, it's the experiential system, but you do need to have some kind of faith in that might be a good thing to do. When I'm not quite sure where your question is, but so one of the reasons for me even having the audacity to even sit here is that when I realized that going to my mat is my spiritual practice, is my practice of connecting to more than myself, even though it might be Uttanasana. It builds on that. And so all I can do, I can't, I'm sure if I told this little story about the fish in the sea, that I'm not sure everybody would get it. But if you get it, then you're already into a spiritual practice. Does that make sense to you? And I have to also say, when I first started in yoga, and most of what I did in India was just so off the wall. We never knew what yoga was. We did a lot of very crazy nostril cleansings and fastings and crazy things. And there was India that was, people were dying around us. The magic, the whole world was just so expanding. I still think India is an expansion place. But when it came to coming home and reading what I could find on the sutras, and I admire Jane for going into it, it didn't resonate with me at all. I wasn't interested. And even when I got more into the practice and I was expecting to go, I had kids and busy, and I said, oh, I can hardly wait to go to my yoga practice. And a teacher might decide that's the night she's going to sit and talk about the sutras. It just drove me crazy. I need this practice. I don't want to be sitting around and doing head talk. So I'm with you when you don't really want to sit and read about it. But the reason why I feel like I can be here is because when I see everything in a bigger picture, then especially COVID, and I see my friends who are going frantic, and I see the pain that's going on. I wish I could say, in the context of the wider picture, it will come to a different place, that day by day, it'll make it. But those are just words, and they're not very helpful. But in a yoga context, they should be very helpful, because how did I get to this attitude? I did it, and I'm still working on it. I did it because I started on the mat. Does that say anything to you?
Yes, and I just want to say that I think that the yoga practice, like for example, I first had just that term namaste. What my teacher told me, that she interprets that to mean the God in me salutes the God in you. And so it's that recognition. I feel like I liked what you said about yoga doesn't tell you what to do. It puts you in a place where you become aware of, and I think what spirituality leaders should do is help you to find that place that is your truth. And not some other truth that's trying to be imposed on you.
Yeah, don't listen to Nasrudin.
Right. Listen to the donkey. I get it. Thank you.
And Louis, I think you're going to join us here with a question.
Yeah, I really like the donkey story too, because I love donkeys, and their sound is unforgettable. And they're very emotional. They can express anger, frustration, and it's a piercing kind of sound. What has been sitting with me a bit is the question of how to see oneself truly. If Teddy, if you said, I don't have a donkey in my house, and then the next thing we see on the screen, the donkey's head behind you there in the doorway, and even if it didn't neigh, but we would see it, we would all say, yeah, Teddy's lying. That's so easy to see when the other person is lying. We can hear the donkeys in the other people. To hear the donkey in ourselves, this is something I think, I'm wondering about that. And also particularly how our practice on the mat is helping us with that, the blind spot, because anything can be mechanical. You can be, I think you can be a musician and be a fantastic technician and not necessarily treat the people in your life well. And you can be a yoga practitioner, and the same can apply. As we've already said, you can be a gardener that brings so much focus and attention that you are, already beyond some of the things we are striving for. Or you could be somebody who's just mechanical, you're earning a living, there's nothing wrong with that. But this, in all of these, it's the kind of attention we bring to it that will make the difference between mechanical or taking it deeper. But in terms of that blind spot for ourselves, some people, we all know these examples. They see a video of Mr. Iyengar kicking somebody, and to them, that is the donkey neighing. They say, look at that man kicking a student. I don't believe that system, because I hear the donkey right there when he slaps the person. I hear the lie, in other words. I think that it's not sincere. And other people, they have that same experience. They know him like some of us do, have met him, and we interpret that aggression as something else, because what we see in our experience, there was something else going on, or in our own experience with him, where maybe he was harsh, something else was revealed to us. In my particular case about myself, that was hard to take, and that was a learning. So I didn't hear a lie in that behavior towards me because I learned something else. But when it comes to my own practice on the mat, physically, how do I learn to see that I'm not upright in Tadasana? But how do I see the things I have told myself about my existence, my belief system, my life, that are not helping me to be more truthful? And I don't have the answer. I'm just asking that question. I know Gita says that it takes 36 years to become a true practitioner, because the first 12 years you learn the technique, the next 12 years you learn to listen, and the last 12 years you learn to be more sensitive about the messages. So I guess I'm somewhere in that trajectory.
So am I. Yeah, I think that asking those questions is part of the whole sadhana, the whole trip, that you're constantly asking yourself, that you're constantly, without judgment. This is a tricky one. That's a key, because if you didn't have those questions, you wouldn't need to practice yoga like we are. Sort of like Jane said, you sort of have to be putting yourself up against something. And you and I have had similar experiences, certainly with the Iyengar method. It was a little better for me, because most of the Zen stories have these unruly harsh Zen masters, you know, and they're always banging someone with a stick or cutting their ears off or their arms off or something. And it's like, that was such the opposite to all the flowing, peaceful, blissful gurus in India. And, you know, so to me, those two were hard to put together. And I still, you know, I still sort of question that, because I used to think, well, if I see, if a person exudes this kind of behavior, that must be the right path to follow. And you know, when I see the Tibetan path, it's kind of like, why would you do that instead of what some of us experienced in the Iyengar yoga path? And am I just, as you said, do I have a whole bunch of blind spots? And I do, and I make, you know, in retrospect or even all the time, I catch myself. I'm trying not to be so judgmental, but I catch myself with the same things that you're talking about. And I'm like you, that's the reason for me to keep practicing, because it's still in the thinking, plump ego mind, those questions. When Guruji said that, it really changed things for my understanding of him. It's still in the plump ego mind, that the self-realization aspect of it, I see maybe more in Thich Nhat Hanh, in the Dalai Lama. I can give you many other names, you may not know them, and in the gardener that nobody knows. But I'm not Thich Nhat Hanh, I'm not Iyengar, and you know, and I'm sorry, I'm just kind of this little fish trying to know that the sea's inside me as well as outside of me, doing and working on it and making mistakes. So I don't know whether that means anything to you, Louis, other than that's kind of what keeps me on this.
Well, yeah, it does make sense. And clearly it's the ongoing questions.
Yeah, yeah.
And clearly there's, for everybody, at least in this conversation, there have been some revelations about the meaning of this practice for us to have stayed in it for so long. So whether we are always able to articulate it in ways that are, you know, that we can, it's not about convincing anybody, but we've clearly convinced ourselves so far.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because I've often offered myself, am I just talking myself into this? And then, and I'm sure you have your own experiences, but often it comes to the life and death experiences. And maybe for some people, the COVID experience where is this just talking myself into it? I can't talk myself into everything, but I can still practice. And if that gives me some sort of relief, then there's something to it. That's all. You know, the biggest message for me was when I was taken into really hard practice, the teacher at that time, a senior teacher, we all know, I had experienced a death of a really close person, not my husband at that time. And I was to give a talk at the ceremony, the talk about this person who was really, really close to me. And I thought, you know, I better not do this yoga class this morning, because I'm just too emotionally distraught and I need to know what I have to say. And then I thought, no, yoga's supposed to clear your mind out. So I went, and I knew that teacher knew what I was going through, and she put me through the ringer in that class, like really hard stuff for me that I had to concentrate and I had to keep my mind on it. And when I look back, and I did fairly shortly after, it was such a cleansing there of not thinking about the future. That is what I was going to do next. And that's happened many times now. And so I realized that just to get my space off my small self, and change direction of mind training was really helpful. And so, you know, in COVID, I think with the difficulties I feel for friends, what am I supposed to do? I can't do anything. I'm bloody well restricted, you know? And then, well, get back into your practice and do that a little more deeply, and maybe hope that something will come out that will be beneficial to others. I don't know if that says anything. I'll just get, there are two quick comments here about dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And they come from the Buddhist context. And when I say that, no one has to believe in Buddhism. I'm saying it like Buddha as a teacher. When he was asked after his long search for meaning in life, going through all the various practices available more than 2,000 years ago. And he was asked, so what have you experienced? You know, is the world a more fantastic place? Are you wealthier? Are you going to be a better teacher? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you know, are you like Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita? You can see the cosmos. And people were asking him everything. And his answer was no, no, no. And they said, well, what are you? I'm awake. That's all he said. I'm awake. So, you know, I hear the sound of the donkey. I'm awake. That's all. And so I'm awake. And so if we know that, if we feel it resonates that we're both the fish and the fish is awake to the sea that's in him and around him, awake. And then what gets in the way is then what your practice is. And then there's another aspect to this that I think is also very important, that in the little bits of awakening anyone might have, and I'm sure you have, there's what they call the bodhisattva, and Iyengar speaks about this in his books as well, of coming back and sharing whatever you can that helps with other people becoming awake. Just sharing, doing what you can. And that's where the Tibetan aspect of compassion, and it's in the sutras, the compassionate behavior and moral and ethical behavior are all part of this big picture, that the compassion part of it in particular. And so it's not, you know, sometimes I think we're getting into this a little bit too much of the self-help kind of stuff, and I'm self-concentrated. It's all about me. I think we have to know in the bigger picture that that's the all about me is a little bit confused with plumping up our egos. So I see that there's just a few minutes left. Is there anything anybody would like to?
I would like to say something if possible. I have practiced Iyengar yoga for many years, but not like it's, you know, sort of here and there. But the one thing that you just brought up about the compassion, learning, like, so yoga has taught me to go inward and to become more and more self-aware and, you know, waking up I always sort of, so it seems to me that it's been very helpful for, you know, for me to be in the world and to try to present as, you know, sort of a compassionate person. But sometimes I feel like I don't know how to, transmit what I have learned, or the awakening, or the understanding of sort of how to be in this world and be an aware, compassionate, loving person to others, where it's hard. It's hard when you see some of what people do to each other, and how people are treated, and even like, and so the thing is that's been helpful to me is when I get all wound up and everything, I find that if I go to a meditative place or within myself, I can kind of move more compassionately in the world. But I don't feel like I don't know that I'm actually doing anything to make things better. But yet I feel that I think in my life, that when in my dealings with people, I try to, sort of always do the right thing, be truthful and all that. But I don't know that I'm actually changing any, sort of making a change in sort of in how to be more of service.
Yeah. And I hear you, because I find that aspect of it too. I mean, couldn't I do something more about helping out in this difficult COVID time? And that has forced me back to there's a kind of a faith in the idea that you will help more if you find that state, the state within you. Pema Chodron is a good person. I don't know if you've heard of Pema Chodron. And she suggests, if you're all caught up in what you didn't do and could do and wish you would have done and how you can help other people, and you get yourself totally upset about it, it's almost worse than if you find that place within you where you're connecting with this bigger aspect. Let's say every day for 10 minutes where your quietness comes in, and then you find that your very presence in its somehow way will affect people without you feeling like you have to. It's very Western to get out there and think you have to tell everybody everything. And I see that in myself. It's a very Western thing. My teacher in Japan, our biggest learning was just to sit in silence.
Yes.
And if I said anything, it was sort of like, I blew it. But just to sit in silence for hour and hour. And then I got, so as soon as I sat down, I could just feel this deep, no thinking presence.
Yes.
And I hear about that, people who sit with the Dalai Lama, that are just with him, get this incredible learning by not even having to say very much. I mean, he laughs when you laugh, he cries when he cries. They're just that presence of taking things. I'm not the Dalai Lama, and neither are you, but that's kind of what I'm getting at with your yoga practice, to create a little more time for that space of it. And then you're not thinking, what should I do? You actually will find that you are doing the right thing by your presence. And that's a very Asian concept, which hasn't really come over with our sticky mats. That kind of, it is more and more now, more and more that aspect of quietness, mindfulness, clarity of mind in the present moment. More and more of that is happening now. But we can, if we know that, we'll see we're doing it in our yoga practice.
Yes. And I just wanted to say one more thing. I apologize for, at the beginning, I was running around trying to get settled. It was kind of a crazy morning for me, and I didn't pay attention to, I was probably disturbing people with all my activity on the screen before we started. I should have just, I didn't realize to get off the screen at that time. I wasn't very present.
Oh.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. We've come in right at 11:30, so thank you so much for that. Teddy, thank you
Yes.
for being with us today from Edmonton, coming into our living rooms and being with us. It, hopefully, I know it gave me something to think about, and I hope it did for others as well. And we hope to do this again. So if you were interested in what we have done today, if you want to just by a little show of hands right now, everybody knows where your participant down at the bottom there. If you want to just wave your little hands and let us know if you want us to do this again, or as Amelia, you can just physically wave too, that's all good. We're just wanting to know if there is interest in it. So
I'd like to take just one moment too before
Yeah.
it just closes off. One of the Buddhist scriptures says that awakening is the highest happiness. And so a little trick for yourself is when you go for a walk today or something, watch to see whether you're awake in your surroundings, and you'll get sort of the magic of existence starts to just get its little bits into you. Or listening to music, the magic of existence, or seeing some art. And that's awakening. But you get more and more of it when you culture your mind towards it by doing your yoga practice. Okay, and I want to thank you both again, Terry and Tanya. I'm so happy to see my special friends, even if it's a little square clip in the corner. And I'm hoping we can just get together and do a lot more of this in real life soon. And I send you all my love. Thanks, everybody. Namaste. Namaste is that I see in you and you see in me. Right now it's be the sea. SEA. Thanks, everyone.